Hi, everybody. Welcome to the seminar for Christmas Island today. Every Wednesday at 1 p.m. we've been doing these, and I haven't scrolled through to see who's on. Oh, I do see a few users that have been here for each of the Wednesdays, and I even see an angler or two that's going to Christmas Island with us, which is excellent. So really looking forward to putting on a good seminar for you today, helping you determine if this is a good trip for you, and if so, how to have just a great time and great success doing it. So it looks like everybody's doing a pretty good job. Everybody's muted at the moment. Later in the seminar, what we'll do is I'll invite you to unmute at the end and ask any questions that don't get covered, or just I'll invite discussion. Some of our other staff members are on there. Bob Miller, who handles a lot of our Christmas Island reservations and just gear sales, and has already been to Christmas Island this year since the reopening is on. Steve Joyce is on. I think Dallas Murray's, either on. I just talked a moment ago, so I think he's on. So those guys will jump in from time to time, but in honor of being efficient for you guys, I'll lead the meeting and the discussion and share quite a bit with you. So and then at any time, let me see if there's any questions in the chat queue yet. I don't see anybody yet or asking questions in the chat queue here, but I'm going to leave it open, and I'll do my best to jump over there from time to time. But absolutely feel free at any point to chat questions in, because if it's relevant, if you get it in there and it's still relevant to what I'm chatting about, I'll just jump right on that, because I think that just drives good real-time discussion. But thank you very much for joining the meeting. I still see there's a couple more people just jumped in. I'm Joe Roeder. I handle quite a bit of the travel discussion and just kind of the travel education here at REDS, and helping people learn about the trips, and then finally, hopefully jump in with one of our hosted groups and join one of our hosted groups here at REDS. So our goal of today is really to give you just a very broad brush background about Christmas Island. There will be a few nuggets that are more detailed for folks that are actually going. There will be a few strategy tips, but we're not going to get down really into the deep nitty-gritty of Christmas Island, how to fish it. But I think it'll be fun, even if you've gone before or you know a little bit about it, to hear some of the things that I have to share with you. So a couple of the first things I'm going to do is the meeting is being recorded. It will get posted later, so I'll encourage you to send it to friends. It'll be on our webpage that has our entire schedule there, and share it with a friend rather than try to reiterate discussion that you heard here to them. Just put the recording in front of them, and maybe they want to go to and team up with you. But I'm going to put some links in the chat box. To get these links, you can either click them during the course of the meeting and bookmark them, or they'll be in your browser history, or you can get them in the recording. Some of them are pretty straightforward, and I'm gonna just talk you through them right now and get them in there so that you just know where to reference it. So the first one I'm going to put in is, I'm just going to put in the trip details, just a link right in there. And that has all of our dates for 2024 listed in there. And I'm even going to put the dates right in there, so when I reference these dates, you have them right there in the chat window. I'll be somewhat unapologetic about trying to get you on one of our hosted groups. We think we do the best job out there. Our travel program that we do here at REDS, it's very, very rare for us to send a group or book anglers without actually being there with you. We want to be invested alongside you. We want to fish alongside you. We want to have the same experiences that you do. And more importantly, we want you to have the same experiences, of the high experiences that we have when we go on these trips. So we're sort of taking you under our wing, and we're there to plan the trip alongside you. So it's pretty rare that we don't send hosts on our group. So I'll be somewhat apologetic about just saying, hey, or unapologetic, I want you on one of our groups, because I think it's a great way to travel. I can't imagine going with just myself as a single to a lodge far away without a coordinated group. So that's what we do here at REDS. Our hosted trips are great. Our hosts act as a liaison and essentially a foreman on behalf of all the anglers in the lodge that book through REDS. where we're going to lobby for optimal fishing programs, optimal fishing times. If there's decisions to be made, a lot of times the head guide can't go individually check with all the anglers in the lodge and say, hey, it would be much better if we left early tomorrow because there's a storm rolling in the afternoon. In a hosted format, the host and the head guide are in contact every day, every evening. The head guide mentions it to the host. The host can digest that type of information and say, yeah, that's a really good choice for our group. Let's jump on it. And then he can be the liaison to all of the anglers in our group and say, yeah, we're going to be out of bed early tomorrow because there's rain coming at 3 or 4 p.m. and we want to be up early and off early so we miss that storm. Those are just one of the many things that a host from Reds is going to be able to do for you. The other thing is, if you're thinking about booking as a single angler, no problem. We pair you up with a bunk mate, we pair you up with a boat mate, you still pay the single rate, and then that single angler pool rotates. So that's a very common question that we get is, can I book as a single angler on your groups? So lots of reasons to use a host. The goal of today is to just get you educated. If you end up booking outside of our hosted dates, that's no problem. We just want you to get to Christmas Island, preferably with us. But if not, let us help along the way with decision making on tackle and packing and fly selection and just general education. The next thing I want to make sure that I don't forget is that we do a saltwater rendezvous hosted here at Reds. And I'm going to grab the link for it real quick right now. In fact, yeah, I'm just going to throw the link in there right now. And our saltwater rendezvous is going to be January 13th. And I'll just share my screen real quickly here. And I'm also going to put this link in the chat window. Now, this rendezvous, I'm just going to say Salt Rendezvous. Don't forget about this, because even if you're not going with us, you can still book a spot into this, okay? Salt Rendezvous, Jan 13th, 2024, okay? And I'm going to put that link in there. Now, even if you're not booking with us, you can still book this. It's $200 if you're not booked on one of our hosted trips. If you're booked on one of our hosted trips, it's included. But we're going to talk. We're going to do lessons and seminars inside the lodge. We will try to procure some space for full-blown casting. But more important than anything, we're going to teach you lots of hacks for saltwater species, decision making, how far in front of the fish to cast, how fast do I strip, how do I handle my line, tips on seeing fish. It's a wonderful event. So we hope that you get in there, but that's also included. And I put a link to that in the description as well. But without further ado, I think I'll jump into Christmas Island. I'm going to answer several big questions right off the bat. First one's just going to be where. In fact, I'll just jump right over into a share. We'll talk about where, when, what we're going to catch, and then finally, how much does it cost? Because that's always an important factor when you're planning any of these dream trips. But I'm going to jump over to Google Earth here, and we're just going to back out for a minute. We're going to look at the Earth as a whole. Now, if you're coming from the West Coast here, it's definitely a little easier access to get to Christmas Island. Coming from the East Coast just adds a little bit of flight time, but the logistics are still fairly similar. We're here in North America, and we've got the equator somewhere down in here. It's not marked, but your flight plan is going to take you over to Honolulu in Hawaii, and then we're going to go due south about 3.5 hours. It's pronounced Kiribati in their native tongue. The language there is Gilbertese, and it's not phonics based. So it's really there is not really any natural pronunciation like there would be with French or Spanish. So this is the island of Kiribati, or Christmas Island, and this is essentially it. But it's a large atoll, and it's sort of a horseshoe shape in the lagoon here. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful flats. And we'll talk more about flight logistics in a minute, but basically you land here at the airport. That gives you a sense of scale of just how small the place is. I mean, if that's the airstrip. And we drive over to London over here, which is the only real town is London. And we've stayed at several different lodges in Christmas Island. We've had good experiences at 2 out of the 3. They've been great, but the Akari House just seems to be the one our hosts really want to go back to. Inachari House is right on the beach, right in the town of London, right here. Allows you to see a little bit of the town. It's definitely a developing country. So it's definitely a far cry from going to even Belize or a lot of other places in Central America, or even Mexico. It is pretty undeveloped. So that's what it looks like. And this is the major entry and exit for the water that comes in and out from the Pacific Ocean right here. That's the only opening. And these are major tidal currents. As you can see, there's channels here. And this is part of what makes this unique or special is this is where your pelagic fish like giant trevally are going to be able to run in from the Pacific Ocean at optimal tides and run into all of this different, I get excited just looking at this, but all of these different lagoons back in here are going to hold giant trevally all the way back into the backcountry. I'm not sure where the hard stop is at here because a lot of what appears to be landmass, what appears to be landmass is actually just shallow water flats. And so you'll spend a good portion of your time on the outer ring of these flats. There's Orvis Flat, there's 9 Mile, there's Go Like Hell Flat. These are all of the world famous flats that are in here in Christmas Island. But that's essentially the where of Christmas Island. In the when for Christmas Island is kind of interesting. So it's 3.5 degrees north of the equator. It pretty much right there in the horse latitudes. There's not a tremendous amount of wind. There's not a tremendous amount of storms. It's pretty flat weather throughout most of the calendar year. So a lot of people say, hey, when's the best time to go to Christmas Island? And it's not seasonal. I'll show you some kind of weather data because I think that's important to kind of know or at least have backed up. But this is the historical weather for Kiribati here. And the yellow represents the annual temperature. And we're looking at 80 degrees of a high and a low of 78 in January. And then we jump over here to one of the hot months and we're looking at an 80 difference. Literally 2 degrees Fahrenheit difference depending on the season. The rainfall gets a little bit more interesting. October is definitely the driest month that there is, so if you're phobic to rain, go in October. April gets a little bit more, but I don't think that the weather is really a factor. It's fine fishing all year long. The only other when that there is to think about is regarding tides. And this is a very common question among astute saltwater anglers. Hey, what tides do you want? Our general preference is to go during full moon weeks. And I think most of our 2024 weeks are all laid out on either full moon or new moon weeks. And that's when the tide swings are at their most extreme. Now that can be challenging. It can be good. There are pros and cons no matter what time that you go. But generally speaking, a full moon is going to offer big tide swings, and that's inviting to the giant trevally that shoot in and out from the Pacific Ocean. So they're somewhat migratory, and they will come in. You'll get fresh batches of fish that will come in to prey in the shallow water flats for all of the mullet and the juvenile milkfish and all the bait that comes out of that backcountry region that was all shallow. Imagine taking a dish and essentially tilting it, and all of that debris is going to run one direction. And that's what happens with those big tide swings. They run back into the shallow water backcountry. And then when that tide shifts again, all of that bait, all of that food, all of those bait fish that aren't strong enough in those larger, stronger tides become vulnerable to the GTs. Essentially, it's very exciting. But in a high tide, the bonefish fishing can be a little bit more unpredictable because the tides change on the flats. You get dropped off on a flat, and I'll talk about kind of how a day works and all that. But I've been dropped off on a flat and the tide shifts so fast. You had 15 to 20 minutes of good fishing and it really filled in quick, and then it got real deep. Well, the guide had planned with the boatman to be there for an hour and a half or two, and then you've got an hour and a half of really just dead fishing. So I've seen that in high tides. So neap tides can be a little bit more predictable for just straight bonefish fishing. But I don't think there's a bad time to go. I think that seasonally throughout the year it's great. Now let's talk about what are we going to catch. Okay, so we'll jump into. I've got a slideshow set up here, and let me get my slideshow set up. I'll go from the beginning and let me share and get that started. There we go. Okay. All right. And I'm not sure how much of my Zoom toolbar shows up down there in the bottom corner, but we'll just leave it right where it is. Okay, so this is one of our hosted groups from years ago. We've gone in to Akari House and the Villages Lodge and been very satisfied at both. But like I said, over the years, we've begun to favor the Akari House. It just seems like just the general logistics and operations really excel at the Akari House. No knocks on any other places, but that just seems to be where most of the hosts want to go back to. Things I mentioned before, there's a lot of reasons for a hosted trip at Christmas Island. Just having a mentor there, somebody who's done the research, taken all the burden of the stressful planning and decision making on that you can go to. We're going to rotate guides. We're going to rotate single angler pairings in the boats. If there's a short straw to be drawn, the guide will take it, or the guide can essentially distribute that short straw if there are boat issues or motor issues, or they're down a guide, that type of thing. The host is going to try to act and equitably solve problems. And one thing about Christmas Island, let me run through the travel logistics real quick. This is going to be short, but the flight planning is really easy. As soon as you book with Reds, we shoot you out a letter. You get a link to a page called our trip management page, and that just outlines the flights. You land in Honolulu on a Monday. We meet up for a beer at Waikiki Brewing Company. We recommend overnighting at the same hotel. It just makes logistics easy. There's a Ramada Plaza down there at Waikiki that's pretty cheap, but still walking distance down to the beach and the strip. The ground transportation from the time you land to get to your hotel is all on you. And then the host will coordinate a group of taxis that we will all share to get from the hotel back to the airport on Tuesday morning. On Tuesday morning is the day that we fly to Christmas Island. There is only one flight a week, so that's why we have to be in Honolulu the day before. I recommend we plan to get to the airport 3 hours early, because the same folks that work the flight crew actually is also the ticketing crew, because because Fiji Airways, you can see that little, I think it's a little 757 in the background there. It's a nice jet, 3.5 hour flight from Honolulu south. It's a small airline, and so it takes them a little while to it takes them a little while. I'm gonna let my dog outside. Hang on. Guys, come on. Boys. Okay. Attack dog, UPS man showed up. So the airport program, really easy. Fly from Honolulu to Fiji Airways, 3.5 hours. That's not a problem. But one thing I want to say about Christmas Island is you've got to be ready to roll with the punches. I don't know how many times we've been there and something doesn't work out quite right. There'll be, logistically, it's just so challenging for the lodge to operate there. A boat motor breaks down, a guide's sick. There's lots of different little things that happen. Maybe you don't get picked up for a while. And so the boatman might drop you off on a flat with your guide. So I guess I'm assuming folks know how the Christmas Island program works. One thing that's really great about it is 100% waiting. You'll use boats to get to the flats. You'll jump out with your guide. Most of us will be on a 2-to-1 guide to angler ratio. The boatman, it's pretty cool logistically. The boatman will actually drop off a group, and then the group will wade the flat for X amount of time. They have radios and they'll communicate. Then what happens is the guide will radio the boatman and say, hey, come pick us up. We're ready to move to a different flat because the tide's changed, or et cetera, or George is thirsty. He needs to, sit in the shade on the boat and cool off for a little bit, whatever it might be. There are times where you might not get picked. It might be an extra hour or even 2 hours because the boatman has had to run a couple of other people and make some long runs at the request of the guides. You just got to be prepared to roll with the punches. Bobby was there for one of the first kind of relaunches after Christmas Island was closed for 3 years. And I think they even ran out of beer, which was a near disaster. But with Bob's good sense of humor and great entertainment skills, they were managed to still keep morale high. Bobby, if you're able in a good spot to chat, was there any other logistical stuff that popped up when you and Eric were there in June?
We did a motor did drop off of a boat into the flats one day, so we were down a boat motor there for a couple days, and they actually managed to get it back working, and we just sent a group on the trucks to go fish via truck, and everyone had a great time. I mean, it all worked out just fine. Those were, the lack of beer and then the boat motor falling into the ocean. Those were the two mistakes or hiccups, but no, not too bad, really.
Yeah, you just got to be ready to roll with the punches. It's an adventure. It's not, it's not cushy and well equipped like a lot of the Central American lodges, but I think you'll find it really, really fun. You're going to be surrounded by enthusiastic anglers. This is a picture of, when we got picked up at the airport and we're heading to the lodge, in Christmas Island. It's just such a wonderful trip to go on. I'll jump into the planning and then we'll look at more photos. There's lots of fish photos coming up, but packing is one thing. Don't overthink it. Just make sure that you're comfortable. You have really good sunglasses and UV protection. You've got a backpack or a sling pack that is capable of having all your day's gear, an ample supply of water. Your flats boots and your wading system should be really comfortable. You're either wearing very, very light, quick dry pants, or like a UV protective tight under shorts is another option. Just have really good gear and good clothing. You don't have to have a lot of it. You can rinse it off in the shower at the end of every day and then hang it on a clothesline. Essentially just kind of do quick laundry of your favorite fishing gear. And then be really organized and test your gear before you go. You don't have to have this half of the stuff that's in the picture over here. That's my stuff as the host from one of my trips. I try to be extreme. I got fly tying materials and a spinning rod to throw teasers and all sorts of stuff you do not need in that picture. Packing, just keep it simple. Now, common question is, do I carry my bags on? Do I check them? I'm really checking most everything because your flats boots are as important as your rods. You can borrow a rod from somebody. You can't borrow a set of flats boots. So unless you're wearing your flats boots on or carrying them on, you're really at the mercy of your check bag anyways to be properly prepared. I just check my bag. I got no doubt that it's going to get there. So I check most everything anymore, and I keep my life in the airport quite simple. So as far as gear, we won't do a deep dive into gear too much, but you need something like an 8 weight and an 11 weight. An 8-10, 8-12 combo would be well prepared, plus a backup. Everything's going to be tropical floating lines. And I will put a gear list. Excuse me, let me bump back here where I got pretty click happy. Now you're seeing all my photos that we were going to get to earlier. Let me start from beginning again. Works a little different when you're on Zoom trying to share it. So yeah, I would just say regarding packing lists, I'll put a packing list link in the chat, but don't overthink the packing. But one thing you want to make absolutely sure of is a really good footwear system, because it is 100% weighting. We've got a picture here with just good neoprene socks, good Simms flat sneakers, and then like a polypropylene liner sock really, really helps. You're going to spend a lot of hours on your feet in the salt water, and the weighting is not incredibly difficult or treacherous. It's a very, it's not treacherous, but you're on your feet for a long time during the day, and that neoprene in your boots can rub your skin raw just because it's wet. So I like the little the liner socks to be really comfortable. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to catch. So everybody's going to wonder about giant trevally. Oh my gosh, they're so exciting. They're a lot of fun. They're pull hard, and there's very few fish that attack like a giant trevally. So yeah, very few of those. And so there's a GT right there. They could get super big. The number one thing about giant trevally is just keep your expectations in check. It's not something where you're going to go there and you're going to catch 6 of these big GTs during the week and your arm's going to get tired from cranking on these things. They're tough to catch. They're not impossible. You know, if you get the opportunity, you do your job right, you're going to be able to get one. There's lots of tips out there on how to be successful doing it. I think having a really quick, very powerful cast so that you can track these things down when they're moving is very important. But a lot of times if GTs are on the feed, they're going to do a lot for you. I mean, they can be pretty competitive and pretty voracious when they do blitz the flat. But just keep your expectations in check. If a good angler fishes hard all week and fishes giant trevally more than half the time, you're probably going to get a nice 30+ pounder per week. Maybe 2, maybe 3, probably not 5 or 6. It's not easy. It's not common. The ocean is big. It's a very special thing to get one of these giant trevally. So just keep your expectations in check. Yeah, they're big fish. They're hard earned. Be patient, and you're probably going to do a lot of prioritizing giant trevally at low light. So you're going to have to kind of commit to that and communicate with your guide and communicate with the group leader that you want to be able to do that, so that we can convey to the head guide, who can then kind of download that preference to the guides that you want to do that. But don't put too much pressure on your guide to go find giant trevally. It's not something where they can just wave a magic wand and get you into them. But that's a picture of Bobby. Bobby in his trips to Christmas Island has always done well on giant trevally. And I don't know if Bobby can back this up, you know, but to me, it's always seemed like walking a long ways for giant trevally has almost been detrimental to my success. When the guide says, hey, this is a good spot, like, it's good to chill out and be patient and kind of wait and lay an ambush for the GTs. Bob, would you say that's been the norm for you on all your success with GT?
Yeah, I guess I would say that's true. I know on this last trip a month ago, we were Eric and I were fishing by ourselves without a guide, and the times that we did get into the GTs, we were like, oh, this spot looks good. We'd said that multiple times, you know, already in the day, let's say. But we got to a spot and we're like, man, this spot looks good. What do you think? And Eric was like, yeah, I think so too. So yeah, we would post up in a given spot for a time. And yeah, sure enough, we got some opportunities doing that where the fish would start cruising through. So yeah, I don't know that walking, just endlessly walking, is necessarily a better thing when it comes to GTs, for sure.
No, I found my success to be generally the guide says, hey, let's be patient. When the guide lights up a cigarette, you're usually in a pretty good spot. So there's your pro tip, people. Just be patient, chill out, and wait for those fish. But the GTs are great. You're going to be in a little bit deeper water, you know, thigh deep, low light. That's what Bob's doing there. In discussion of just the endless walking, I have done that for GTs in the backcountry. I mean, I've walked the shoes off my guides literally back there in the backcountry, and that is one where you can cover a little bit more ground when those GTs are actually in these back lagoons. And hey, Bob, I don't know if you're on a PC, but I'm going to grab, if you can you grab Winston's drone video and put that in the chat for folks?
Yeah, I can. Mm-hmm.
If you can grab that, that'd be great. Yeah, I'll just jump back and slide share so I don't have to jump to that. We have some drone footage that one of our travel hosts that was just there in July shot that really does a great job of showing what it's like to walk, you know, right where you're seeing right here in some of these backcountry spits, bars, and lagoons. It's really, really great. But you can walk the backcountry and you can walk a long ways, but most of the giant trevally are probably going to be caught when you're in that deeper water. You could be thigh deep, waist deep, waiting on a very strategic ambush point, you know, for the giant trevally. We've got some flies. I'll just comment on flies. The brushy series of flies that we have from Fulling Mill are our best giant trevally flies in size 4/0. Yeah, I mean, the giant trevally, I mean, they're absolutely spectacular. I enjoy spending a lot of time on them. Not all of them are going to be super duper big, but I guarantee you hook, kind of a little, fun size version of giant trevally like that. They're going to take you for a ride. They're an unbelievably hard fighting fish. You can see that their pectoral fins are like, 16 inches long. I mean, a fish that has pectoral fins 16 inches long is used to attacking and maneuvering at extremely high speeds. I mean, when these fish eat, it is very exciting. When they run, it's even more so. But the giant trevally are absolutely just fantastic. Steve or Bob, do you guys have any just little quick hitters to add on giant trevally? Steve may not be able to jump on.
I'm jumping on right
okay.
now. So yeah, I would say with GTs, it definitely, one thing we like to do in Christmas Island is we like to rotate guide personnel. And the guide hierarchy there, when we have the whole lodge booked on our hosted trips, we control the guide rotation, and we don't put anglers with the same guide all week. There is a very rigid guide hierarchy there, and the most senior guides there get the best flats at the best times. And just like Joe and Bob were saying, you kind of get to a spot on a flat, those guides know when the GTs are going to show up, and it's based on tides. They want to chase the fish that they're eating. They want to chase them into the outgoing or incoming tide because it slows them down enough that they can catch them. And so those guides, the most senior guides definitely catch the most GTs there, and it's because they're in the best place at the best time. So we make a very concerted effort to do that. How we really figured that out, I was on a trip one time. We had 18 people in our group, and there were 4 other guys in camp. And the 4 other guys had been at camp. They come for 3 weeks every year. And so they were fishing with the very best guide every day. They had him all day, every day. And those 4 guys caught more GTs that week than the other 18 of us combined. And after about day 3, I was going, now, wait a minute, where are those guys going tonight? And our guide's saying, oh, they're going to such and such. And I'm like, well, can we go there? No, that's that guide spot for tonight. And it's like, well, they had it last night. And he said, that's the way it is. So anyways, yes, that makes a huge difference. You got to be in the right place. And that's really one of the benefits of using a hosted trip format down there.
Yeah, that's really well put, Steve. I found the same thing in that comment I said about standing in one spot. If you're with a guide that is committed to that one spot, it's probably because that's the spot. So yeah, the giant trevally they're outstanding. There's lots of articles and things, and I'll share some at the end of the chat and give you some resources to research. But you're really looking at a 10 to 12 weight rod. Your leader should be, I like 60 pound, just straight fluorocarbon leader, just one chunk of 60 pound is great. I start with about 8 feet, work it down to about 6 as I change flies or, abrade the tippet if I hook fish that have some teeth or gets abraded. Once it's below 6 feet, I generally just go with one fresh new piece of fluorocarbon. So very simple leader system and setup. You just want a real big, strong, big arbor reel, 65 pound backing in a nice heavy rod. You want that backing wound properly and super tight. I don't recommend just hand winding backing for any of these big game species like giant trevally. So yeah, giant trevally are great. I'm going to hit a few of the questions in chat real fast just to keep up and let you know that if you chat them in there, I am going to get to them. But the wading boot recommendations, I kind of hit that. The Simms, there really isn't a rival to the Simms as far as a pure saltwater boot, but it has to be of the lace-up variety so that you can crank it down tight. It's got good ankle support. Little dive boots like the Zip-It booty from Simms or a neoprene booty is not going to do it for you. There's going to be rock and coral rubbish and a lot of wading and hiking on that kind of stuff. So a lot of jagged material there. The wind conditions, what are typical wind conditions? It's always going to be blowing, I'd say 5 miles an hour. It's rarely just pure glass, but it's always going to be like 5 to 10 would be really common. The coastlines that we fish, I'll have a picture of that later on in the seminar, but the coastlines, you'll hit a little bit more direct wind than you will in the lagoons. But I'd say just a 5 to 10 mile an hour wind. I can't ever remember having like extreme wind like we do like off the eastern seaboard of Central America, where we get fronts that with a real strong, heavy pressure that push in. So the wind, as far as overall wind situation, it's not a historically windy event. So Bobby just shared over this drone footage that I think was really good. I'd meant to bookmark that and just slipped my mind, but it's in the chat, so you can watch the whole thing and just kind of see what it's like. But it's a really great overview of Christmas Island. But I think what to me was really kind of a cool piece of it was just looking at the flats from above. I mean, if that doesn't make you want to get to Christmas Island, I don't know what possibly could. There's, boatmen dropping off anglers to fish and walk these flats. It's an unbelievably beautiful place. So you can watch the whole thing and check it out. There isn't, it's not a fishing action video. It's just really just a lot of scenic drone footage on here that gives you a real kind of a real world idea of what it looks like. So anyway, Bobby, it's the YouTube link that's in the chat there, so you can check that out. So anyway, back to the presentation. We'll run through bonefish and a few other things, and then you can live fire at me with some questions and answer stuff. Last question on chat was, how soft or firm is the walking, and is it sticky? And it's very, I would say on average, if 10 was asphalt and 1 was just sloppy mud you couldn't wade in, I'd say it's a 7 or 8 most of the time. It's pretty firm bottom and pretty easy walking, pretty clean sand. It's not that muddy stuff that you experience in the Yucatan or other mangrove-esque locations. So okay, so bonefish is going to be the #1 target species, hands down. And then that's Bobby there with a dandy bonefish. You can see the beautiful palm trees in the background, white sand flats, absolutely gorgeous. There's a big average size. They're super hard fighting fish. It's 100% wade fishing on foot. It's a very intimate, fly fishing experience there. You don't have the pressure of that pulled boat moving along and having a guide right there on the deck, saying that, we're moving up on the fish, you'd better make the shot quick. In Christmas Island, you can walk slowly. You could even stop and wait for the fish to come to you, and you can get much closer to the fish. So I would say it's very beginner friendly, as long as you keep your expectations in check on the giant trevally. Christmas Island overall is a pretty beginner friendly trip in that sense. You will need to have a little bit of independence for adventure, because you're not going to be, shoulder to shoulder with your guide the entire time. Your guide is going to bounce back and forth between the 2 anglers that of which they're assigned. But overall, you can sneak up, much closer to the fish. You can find schools of fish, and you can blind cast off the deep ledges at times. If you have a beginner that you want to invite that's at least done some fly fishing, it's no problem. They're going to have an excellent time there. So some cool things about Christmas Island and bonefish: you can fish them on the coast. That coastal ops is just a unique bonefish fishing experience, to fish bonefish inside of a breaking reef, which is really cool. It's a very kind of migratory element to the bonefish fishing there. The bonefish will really move with the tides, and you'll have these schools of bonefish that are moving pretty quickly by you. And so a lot of times you might stay in one spot, depending on the tide shift, you'll have schools of bonefish just filing by you all, for an hour. You might have just bonefish every couple minutes. You got a nice school that's kind of moving past you. So there's this migration that takes place during those tide swings. That's really cool. And as I mentioned, the bonefish fishing in there is beginner friendly. I'll show you a few pictures of the bonefish. I just grabbed a couple kind of spontaneously. That's a typical bonefish flat, knee deep bonefish fishing, fishing inside kind of that aqua colored shoal. The bonefish want to be up on the flats to get away from sharks. but again, all wade fishing. Real typical bonefish, being held by one of our hosts, Chad Gillespie. Real common size. Doubles, you're going to have them. That's just something that's going to happen. You know, they're out there in a little bit deeper water there, but just again, palms in the background, gorgeous colors, just spectacular place to fish. There's Winston with a really typical bonefish. You can see he's got bonefish flies of different weights at the ready on his shoulder strap. He's got heavy eyes on the top there, Christmas Island specials. Then it looks like he's got a bead chain eye gotcha hiding in there too. So that's a really kind of a good tip, is just to keep flies of various weights readily accessible depending on the flap that you're in. There's a nice one there. There's a Christmas Island special with bead chain. No, that's a gotcha, excuse me, in the mouth of that. Really nice bonefish right there. And yeah, the bonefish are great. But there's a few tips that I got for bonefish there. Is when you're hunting for bonefish, if you want to get good at it, you know, really look for casting at singles and trying to make good shots on singles. To me, that's the most exciting thing. And the bigger bonefish will often be solo. And schools can be pretty easy to pick bonefish off, but when you try to shoot at a bigger single, that's a really good challenge. And that might mean refraining from casting at some of the schools when a bunch of schoolies come by in that 1 to 2 or 3 pound range. You might have to hold off, and it takes a lot of discipline, I assure you, and wait for that 5, 6, 7, 8, even 9 or 10 pound fish that might be in a little bit deeper water that's moving, and it might even look like a little shark. At times, you know, when you see that big single bonefish, it may not even register immediately as a bonefish. So I think that's a really good tip, is work on the singles. The other thing is, I read this in Lefty Kray's book on saltwater fly fishing, and I thought is always a fabulous tip, is just wait until you see the fish. Don't just react to your guide's coaching. There are going to be times, and I've had this experience myself, and with all humility, even on recent trips, where the guide's telling me to cast at 30, you know, say everything's 30 feet, 30 feet, 30 feet. And I cast, and the guide's pointing, like there's a bonefish right there. And I'm looking at what looks like completely blank white sand. Like there is no fish there. And I will cast into that blank sand. I'll follow instructions. I try to be a good client. And I'm like, I'm going to show this guy, you know, there's no fish there. And a fish will literally, I will have a ghost eat my fly and take off. So, and I'm a pretty decent at spotting fish. So there's going to be times where they're extremely difficult to see, but if you ever want to get good at it and get really good at spotting fish, your first action should not be to just blindly cast in the general direction that your guide is telling you to cast, is to take a deep breath and take a moment and really look. And I'll stop my share for just a moment, but really look at where the guide's instructing you to go. And then if this were my fly rod, you can point your fly rod out and you can invite your guide to point at the fish, and that long pointer will really get it dialed in, and you don't even have to communicate or ask. You just point your rod and the guide will take it and move it to the fish. Once you start to see the fish before you cast, your likelihood of success on that fish goes way, way, way up. And the likelihood that you're going to become a strong and self-reliant saltwater angler is going to go way up, because there's going to be, say, 50% of the time, you're not going to have elbow to elbow attention from the guide. So I think that's really important to do that. I mentioned having extra flies out and ready, changing flies based on water, not only water depth, but the velocity of current or tide. In heavy tides, you will need flies that get right to the bottom and make some contact with the sand. Many times in Christmas Island, I've tried to fish heavy tide flow with bead chain eyes. Doesn't work very well. Your fly just blows out, and it'll literally feel like a river at times there. Standard tippet for bonefish is 16-pound tippet, a little bit heavier than you're going to fish most places. You can even fish 20-pound tippet. You start to fish 20 or 25-pound tippet. The tippet strength will exceed the strength of your hook, and you will break hooks. Bonefish hooks are generally fairly light wire. If they're a number 6, that's not a super heavy gauge hook. the tippet strength is 20-pound test. I mean, we land giant tarpon on 20-pound class tippet. Like the tippet will break the hook on fish. So just be aware of that. If you try to horse those bonefish really hard on that heavy line, the hook might be the first thing to go. As far as bonefish goes, 8 to 9 weight saltwater rods are recommended. The 9 weight comes in pretty handy because it'll overlap into some of the other species, but I wouldn't go with a 7 personally. I think that's a little light. It's a little fragile. And there's just so many opportunities to cast a bluefin trevally or golden trevally or some of the other species that we'll talk about in a moment. So saltwater specific rods, they're much more durable. They're much more trustworthy. If you're going to bring an all water rod, say, your old Orvis Clearwater or whatever it is, definitely bring a backup. Without a doubt, you want something that's fast action, can deliver longer casts into the wind, and is durable, because throughout the course of a week, you're going to use and abuse that rod pretty heavily, and we don't want to see having a bag plead and borrow a rod. We'd rather see everybody be pretty independent. The host is there for like a safety net. If you're totally out of luck, the host will bring some extra gear, but there's no way we can supply enough backup gear for 22 anglers that are in our group. So you can bring whatever rod you want. If you're shopping for rods, get a saltwater specific rod and get the best rod that you can afford, especially the 8 weight, because it's where you're going to spend most of your casting time on it. And I'll put a link to fly selection in the chart. In fact, we'll just jump over and look at a few flies real quick. While I bring that up, Bobby and Steve, do you guys have just any more quick hitters on bonefish that you think is relevant to share with the group?
I would say, Joe, that one thing I learned about bonefish in Christmas Island, there really and truly are enough of them there. Like you said, Joe, it's hard not to throw at a 3-pound bonefish that's swimming by, but there's a good chance there might be a bigger one coming. There's enough bonefish there that it's easy to kind of get caught up in just the flat out fish catching part of it. And I would say, figure out what you like to do as far as bone fishing goes and go looking for those fish. If you want to fish tailing bonefish, move up way into the shallows, shallower than you would even think those fish would be swimming in. And when you've got the right light, the sun at your back, those tails glisten in the sunlight, and you look across some of those flats, and it is mind-blowing how many tails you see in the air at one time. And if that's what you want to do, then go do that. If you want to fish for bigger fish, you're going to be fishing, probably walking some of those coral ledges along the bank, where it's a 2-foot step into the water, and you've got to watch every step that you're taking because that coral is super sharp. But some of those big fish move right up along those edges, and they'll cruise those banks. And I mean, some of those bonefish that you see on that stuff are so big, you think it's a shark coming for a minute before you realize that's a bonefish, and it's coming my way. So don't get caught up in the fish catching part of it. Seek out the fish that you like to get and get them on your terms.
That is really, really great advice. We see it in all these hosted trips. We see a lot of ego, not in a negative way, but people get hijacked by their own ego a little bit. They want to spend a lot of time on giant trevally. They want to spend a lot of time catching a lot of bonefish. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. But I think what Steve pointed out is it's a beautiful destination. Just figure out what you like to do and just do exactly that. And it really is a place you can kind of get lost in your own thoughts out there while you're fishing. Fly list. Bobby, if you've got anything, go for it. Just quick tips.
I was just gonna say, kind of echoing what you guys have said, but just don't move too fast when you're wading the flats. Because there's been times where you could not even move, and the bonefish just keep coming to you, right? Or you are walking real slow and you're not seeing anything. Doesn't mean there aren't fish there, right? I mean, you're going to miss a lot of fish just because you're moving too quick and you're not looking. And the guides can see them much better than you can, but maybe the guide isn't with you at that moment. So go very slow, take your time. And sometimes just waiting on the edge of a flat that the fish are pushing up on due to a tide change, they're just going to keep coming right to you. So no need to get too crazy and start hustling around the flat when you don't have to. And then there was a couple questions. In terms of barbless or barbed flies, I've always used a barbed fly, not pinch the barbs. You're going to lose plenty as it is. They come unhooked. And then in terms of, I mean, I always use a non-slip mono loop knot for my bonefish flies. A loop knot or just a regular clinch knot, I'm sure would work fine. And then, you know, you want to use your Homer Rhodes loop knot on the GT flies.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for getting those in the chat, Bobby. Here's a quick fly list. We don't, this is, I think I already put this in the chat, or I will if I didn't. But there's just a general fly list. There are lots of good flies you can take, but we scrutinize over flies at Reds. You know, we sell, I think we probably sell more saltwater flies than anybody in the world. But there's just a basic fly list, and you can come and you can buy this whole thing, you know, in preparation from your trip. But you're probably going to want to boost up the quantities on a few of these because they're just, you know, we're just giving you a list here with this package. So you're probably going to spend more than $93 on flies for Christmas Island. And on these trips like Christmas Island, we'll talk about cost here in a minute. These trips, part of the reason they're affordable is because we do provide our own tackle. But in this assortment here, you're going to have some giant trevally flies like Jim Socks, and not your average popper for GTs on cloudy days. You know, that is a great way to search for GTs. Those two-tone brushy patterns that I talked about, the brushies are in there. And then a variety of different kind of heavy crabs for your triggerfish and your golden trevally, which we'll look at all those species in a minute. If you don't know what that is, you'll find out here in a second. And then just a variety of different bonefish flies with a strong emphasis on Christmas Island specials. The sparkle and the flash of that fly just seems to get them. So let me make sure that I got that in the chat there. Yep, I did put that in the chat. So let me get this, let me get my kind of my slideshow going back up, and we'll talk about some of these other species, and then we'll talk about what it costs and kind of what it costs to get there, and et cetera. So which is a very affordable trip. You think you'd be surprised if you haven't looked already. But the other species that we're going to target, I mean, there's times, I mean, we don't even know the names of all the species of fish that we catch in Christmas Island. We kind of ran through a couple of the big ones first. The bonefish and the giant trevally are like the two biggies. But we've got triggerfish. These are really cool looking fish. They live in shallow water. They're easy to see. They're really fun. They got a little personality, and we throw crab patterns and big shrimp patterns at these triggerfish, and they could be fairly hard to catch. And but they're very entertaining because they tail a lot. They stick their tail out of the water, and they're easy to spot. Bluefin trevally are kind of the third major species, you know, behind giant trevally, I'd say. The bluefins are great. There's milkfish there. I'm not a huge fan of targeting the milkfish, but they fight great. And there are milkfish there, and you will hear about that. There's golden trevally, and then there's a bunch of stuff offshore, you know, your typical big blue water species. And we'll just run through a few. But the triggerfish are great. They're easy to wait on. You know, they're in the shallow waters. There's ladyfish there that you'll get, you know, you can get them with, I mean, a variety of flies, but they eat a pretty big streamer. So if you're fishing for bluefins or giant trevallies, you may get busted by a queenfish or a ladyfish. You know, the two names there will be used interchangeably in Christmas Island. And they jump pretty good. They're called like a poor man's tarpon if you catch those in, you know, Central America. There's little black tip sharks. Be very careful when you hold these things. Their teeth are like razor blades. But there's black tips that you can throw out that are pretty aggressive, and they fight and jump like crazy. Black tips are fun. The bluefin are among the prettiest species you'll ever fish to, and they're probably the fastest species that I've ever hooked as far as their just raw acceleration. Here's another shot of a bluefin caught on a, you know, black streamer. You want a couple of those dark streamers on the trip. Yeah, there's Bobby with a little bluefin, and you can get those. Bobby's got his bonefish rod out right there. So when you see bluefins and you get an opportunity, you can just throw your shrimp pattern at them. They don't have teeth. You don't need bite guard or big heavy tippet, and just strip your shrimp pattern like a bait fish. And the bluefin's like a faster moving fly. Here's a little golden trevally. They act a little bit more like a permit. They're very slow. And the golden trevally are like a feather in your cap. I don't know how many of those have you caught, Bobby. I found pictures of you with several of them, which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, I think just a few. I don't know that I got one on this last trip.
Yeah, they're kind of like a feather in your cap. They don't school up. They don't move fast. They're more well thought out in how they feed. They like a small crab pattern or a shrimp pattern, and they can get pretty big. You can get them to 20 to 25 pounds. I've never landed one anywhere near that big. I mean, most of mine have been little 5-pounders like this guy right here. But the golden trevally or striped trevally, the guides will use the two names interchangeably, and I'm not sure how many different slight subspecies are within those families. But the goldens and the striped, they'll consider them both the same when they're talking about them. There's a beautiful shot of a triggerfish's teeth and mouth. And triggerfish will literally bite your hook in half. They chew on coral. They got some nasty chompers, and they will bite your hook in half. So yeah, thing of beauty there. Keep your finger out of there. Apparently they can bite the tip of your finger off, from what I hear. Now offshore, there's Bobby with a wahoo. If you go offshore, Bobby can kind of speak to this. I mean, I think he and I kind of feel the same way about it. But the offshore is like, it's not really fly fishing. Bobby, why don't you touch on the offshore stuff? You've done, I think more of it than I have.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to, the success we've had doing it, I've had doing it was with gear rods. A guy would bring a gear rod with some trolling lures, and you'd go outside the island and troll. And it's, I do enjoy it, but it's certainly not waiting on the flats. And it's a nice, maybe a break partway through the week, hang out on the boat and do some trolling. I think, you can catch them on your fly rod, but it's not as effective, and you can end up twisting up your lines pretty good. It is sure nice. We catch the wahoo, we catch fresh tuna. It's nice to have some fresh tuna to eat. That's a big plus if a group goes fishing offshore. But yeah, it's certainly not waiting the flats. It is a fun thing to do, but if you don't have the gear rods and the lures and such, I don't know that it would be tremendously worthwhile. On this last trip, we did do just a half day. We caught one tuna, called it a day, went back to the lodge, got our fly fishing gear, and then headed out on the flats. And I caught a GT that afternoon. So, you can kind of do some half days of it. In the past, I've mostly done full days out doing blue water. But it is cool to see the outside of the island.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, Bobby. I've done that before too. Is you do a half day of blue water in the morning, and then the host comes in, is instrumental in that deal, because the host has to communicate with the group of anglers that are going blue water fishing. They really need to operate as a unit with some shared values and plans, and then be flexible if those plans change. Because some guys might want to blue water fish the entire day, the day they go. But I've done the same thing. Like, hey, give me 3 or 4 hours of blue water fishing, and then give me 3 or 4 hours of wading the flats. I don't like being out in a boat on the outside that long. Yeah, the blue water thing, you can catch tuna, wahoo. There's some billfish opportunities. There's a bunch of skipjack or bonita. But the tuna is kind of what the guides really want to find out there, because it's such good table fare, and it is nice to have some fresh fish. But there's some blue water ops, but it's not going to be fly casting. You can drag your fly behind the boat in an effort to call trolling fly fishing, but it's fun to go do for a little bit. But I want to make sure that we're very accurate or honest in saying you're not going to be casting off the deck of a boat out there in schools of feeding fish. It's probably going to be dragging lures, dragging flies. Okay, moving along, and then we'll do just questions and answers. We'll just open it up. there's some other stuff that you want to know about at Christmas Island. You saw the beautiful flats, that were there. It's an absolutely gorgeous place. The bird life is amazing. You're getting a walking tour through this habitat every day. Like every day, you're going to see all sorts of different birds and crabs and fish and aquatic things and species that you don't see anywhere else. Rarely does a plane fly over. I mean, rarely will you even hear a plane. There's no white noise. There's no cell phone reception. It's quiet. So you get that walking tour every day. There's some coastal fishing that you get to do. And it's kind of a cool humanitarian experience too. I mean, we leave great tip money when we're there. A lot of times we'll bring little toys from the dollar store for the guides' kids. And then you give away, fishing shirts and boots and tackle, and really help these guys along in their guiding career, because all they really get for fishing gear is just what we give them. And the Reds groups have historically been the most generous groups. The way our hosts typically coordinate an evening party is we do a big gift out, or a big kind of gift. It's not really an exchange, but we do a big kind of almost like a Christmas on Christmas Island party, and make sure that we bless these guides with some good stuff. And it's kind of funny what they want. We can chat about it, but in just a second. But I'm gonna give you some more ideas of what the guides like, to have. But the frigate birds are amazing. There's beautiful rookeries there. It's just gorgeous hiking around. Fishing the coastlines is a very unique experience, fishing these flats inside the reef. And it's a really kind of heightened experience when it comes to saltwater fishing. And you're going to catch crazy stuff. Like, I don't have picture that's on the coast as well. I just threw that in there because I thought, I don't know the name of that fish. Maybe Bobby does or Steve does, but you just catch stuff that you don't even know the name of it. There's a fish swimming and you're like, oh, I'll cast at that. I'll cast at that. I'll cast at that. It's really a place like no other. It really is a very, very special, destination in that sense. But let's see if Bobby or Steve have any concluders. The cost for the trip is $3,200 currently. It's probably going to go up to about $3,500 or $3,600 when the lodge gets full momentum going again. That's my guess. It's still a deal. You get long fishing days, lots of action. It really is a great trip. The accommodations they're clean, but they're very straightforward, basic. If you have questions about or hesitations about the accommodations and things, just email us privately, and I'll put Bob, Steve, and my email address in the chat, and email us. But it's clean, it's comfortable. I think it's going to suffice for a good fishing adventure for you. There are horror stories in the old days of what the accommodations were like, but the Ikari House does pretty good job for you. Steve or Bob, you guys have anything to add before we just open up just Q&A? And I don't care if one of you guys hits that question in the chat there regarding Fly Alliance, but it's a wonderful, wonderful trip. Let's just have some Q&A, and there's our email addresses in there. Reach out to whoever you feel most comfortable if you want to get booked up. And before we do that, in case there's anybody who has to patch off, we've already gone just over an hour. Dallas is on here. Dallas, if somebody wants to just jump on this trip or one of those dates I put in there, how are they gonna get signed up to do this?
Yeah, easiest way to do that is just going to be to shoot me an email, and I'll add my email into the chat right now. Shoot me an email. Let me know what dates you're kind of pondering, and I'll let you know what we have available. We do a pretty good job at keeping the date availability live kind of on the website. So if something does fill up, it should note it on the website. But if there's something, dates you have in mind, just send me an email and I can answer any of your travel questions or any of those kind of questions. I would say Joe, Steve, and Bob probably have more of the technical questions down. But anyways, if you have any questions in terms of traveling to Christmas Island and what that might look like, or availability, or how to even get yourself on the list, feel free to shoot me any of those questions. And yeah, I'll put my email in the chat right now.
Oh, looks like we booked somebody last night. That's awesome. Thank you for getting signed up. That's great. Feels a little bit like a telethon when we're like, oh, somebody just made a pledge, but that's literally in the chat right now. Yeah, it's a super trip. You know, we can't recommend it highly enough. We think it's absolutely, you know, we wouldn't go again and again and again if we didn't think it was, you know, just kind of top notch. But let's just go ahead and start hitting these technical questions. And there's a whole bunch here. I'll just start at the top here. If at all, when would you recommend heavy lines like a Rio, heavy lines like Rio Bonefish Quick Shoot or SA Grand Slam? It's a good question, Mike. Either of those lines are going to work great. I personally like a traditional bonefish taper for my bonefish fishing, but those lines shoot quick, and they're, you know, you could be wading shin to thigh deep, and you're not going to see the bonefish until they're close. And some of those lines that are head heavy are really, really great for making those short, you know, quick technical casts. You know, ones where you just one false cast and drop it at, you know, sub 40 feet. Those are really, really good lines for that. So yeah, no problem with that. It's not going to be quite as technical as like the Bahamas, you know, or some of those other flats fish. John Miller asks, which fish is it that Bobby has that's a wahoo? Is one that we flashed up that was like just mega. Yeah, mega. Kim and Dick asked if they have snorkeling areas. Yes, there's great snorkeling. Bring your own snorkel gear, you know, mask and snorkel minimum, you know, probably ditch the fins, you know, just for packing purposes, because you're gonna have fishing tackle too. They also do a lot of, it's a very popular scuba destination. And, you know, post-COVID, I don't know, Bobby, did anybody scuba when you ran your hosted trip in June?
No scuba diving on this one.
Okay.
Just fishing. Everyone fished every day.
Yeah, it's a very popular scuba, and they do some night dives and things there. And I don't know if that is any interest to Kim and Dick, but it's a very popular scuba destination, and they do, the scuba groups there do a great job. But yes, lots of snorkeling, easy to do every day. It's something you could definitely do that. So. And then the other one is, Tim's asked, can I stay in touch with home by internet? You cannot. There's not going to be any reliable internet connection there. We've been making stuff up. If we said there was, you're going to want to bring a satellite messenger, or you can use the host satellite messenger to just say, hey, we got here and all is good. You're not going to be able to send lengthy messages and things like that. Obviously, for emergency reasons, the city is connected to the web, you know, the city itself, but we're not going to be able to promise any type of Wi-Fi or any connection like that. Bob, you guys used just satellite messengers in June, correct?
They did have some internet. You could go over to the office and get a code, and it was pretty slow. You had to be standing over there by the office. But you know, it was enough to send iMessages, and some of the guys, I did see some of the guys not video chatting, but audio calling people back home. But yeah, just safest to say that it's limited or unavailable. And then if you can, you know, unexpectedly give your wife a couple text messages, hey, that's great, you know.
Yeah, don't count on it. But we'll bring a satellite messenger, and that's enough to just say, hey, we're here. But because of don't count on it. That's part of what's nice about it is just going dark for a week. You don't have a lot of distractions. Hey, feel free, anybody who has questions, unmute and go ahead and jump in and pipe up, and feel free to ask any questions that you have, you know, regarding the trip. We have a small enough group here that chat in.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Hey, Steve here. I'm curious, is there a pronunciation guide for the local language for common expressions that we might hear from the guides, or to be able to greet them in their own language?
You know, I saw that somewhere floating around. Bobby, do you have one of those?
No, do not. I have not seen one. The guides speak, you know, some of them good English, some of them marginal, but they're not, I would not say they're super chatty, you know. Not like, you know, in Mexico you can ask them about their families and their daily lives. I mean, certainly you can talk to them about that stuff, but they're not, in my experience, not wanting to be real chatty out there on the flat. They're there for fishing. But
Right.
that's just my take, I guess.
I was just thinking more trying to be courteous by making an effort to talk to them, just even if it's a simple hello, how are you greeting every day.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Steve Lanigan, I'm putting you in charge of a Gilbertese translation document so that we can do that. That's your job, okay? I'll have extra flies in case anybody loses them. You have the cheat sheet for Gilbertese expressions.
I've got the expressions. I don't have the pronunciations. I'll send you.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, yeah, because yeah. Well, Christmas Island got its name because Kiribati is pronounced Kiribati, and then people thought they were saying Christmas, and so they just called it Christmas Island. So yeah, Steve's right in saying you can have I think I saw the text version from you, but just because you have the text version doesn't mean you're making the right sounds at all whatsoever. That's a good question. Yeah, we should work. We'll get a lesson when we're there on day one. We got a question just about rod and reel rentals, company recommendations. Reds, we had to just stop renting rods and reels. We just could not accommodate big groups, with gear for rentals. But I'm not sure of one. What we bumped into was what it costs us to put together, lines, reels, rods. We had to charge so much for the rentals that overwhelmingly we just felt it was a better value for people to buy affordable gear. So you can weigh it out, if you can find something wonderful, but we just felt like people's dollar was much better spent just on getting affordable gear, using it, owning it, and then either reselling it at the end of the trip if you're never going to use it again or passing it on. So no, I don't have any rod and reel rental company recommendations. Okay, who else has questions? Unmute, speak up. Fire them at us. Tim asks, is it okay to carry on a 3-piece rod tube longer than normal carry-on? Yes, you can carry on a 3-piece tube. It's a little awkward trying to get it in the bins and whatnot, of course, but you'd have to carry that one on because it's not fitting in your suitcase. For me, I value the efficiency of my travel so much. I mean, everything I have is going to be 4-piece, even though I have other rods. But you can carry that rod on. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Nothing at all. Oh, there was one question earlier. It was just recommendations for GT fly lines. And let me put the packing list. I'll put the packing list for this trip right in the chat right here. And I'm going to bring that up right now. And that's got some of the currency recommendations and things like that. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty about, tipping and that kind of stuff right now. We'll worry about that once you're all signed up and you're on the trip. But I am going to put in the packing list link, and then we can look at it together really quickly. And there you go. There's it's a link to a PDF, and then we'll just jump over. We'll look at the packing list. So that's the link I just put in there. This is a very detailed packing list. And some of the stuff that's on the list, you make your own decisions on whether you're going to bring all of it or most of it, or you might even bring more. But what I was going to say about gifting stuff for the guides, it's always kind of funny, the stuff that they like to have. But like, a Yeti style water bottle, like a nice insulated bottle, it's a great gift. The guides love headlamps, extra batteries for headlamps, little charging banks to go with their phones, a few little kids' toys from the dollar store and whatnot. But in addition to this packing stuff, it's always nice to throw in a few gifts for the guides there and their families. But that packing list is available in the chat. You'll get this as soon as you're booked into the trip. You'll get a link sent out to you. The link will take you to this page right here called our trip management page. It's got everything you need to know regarding your flight planning. And then we do have, and I'm going to throw this in the chat when we get done here as well. In fact, I'll do it right now. And that's got our travel agent that we recommend. It's got her contact information, but we strongly recommend using her if you're booking, a hosted trip with us. It's got all the lodging information, makes it a really easy trip to plan. But regarding fly lines, the fly line I recommend, let's just jump right to the line. There are different lines. There's lines that are built for GTs. They're on a little stronger core. I personally don't think they cast quite as well, the heavier core stuff, but they are going to be a little bit more durable. But I just like the weight forward, if I'm taking an 11 weight forward 11 floating, tropical outbound short, the floating version. It's got a really short 30-foot head. You can see the diagram here. That makes it load really quick and shoot really fast. I don't tend to find I throw extraordinarily long casts in Christmas Island. Most of it's going to be pretty short because the fact you're walking and you're going to have all this fly line being like managed or drug around you. And the more line you have, the more problems you're going to have. And so I like to keep things pretty short. 50 feet of line, I think, is very adequate. And that tropical outbound short will throw 50 feet with, like, literally, if you just have fly in water, you can drag it up into kind of a roll cast and throw one kind of half roll cast, half false cast, and then just shoot it to 50 feet. I mean, it's the fastest line that there is, in my opinion. So I think that's a great line. If you're, I think it's a great line. If I were taking one, I'm going to take a tropical outbound short. I trust that line. I know that line extremely well. I think it's a great product. So yeah, that's a good question. So another question is emergency evac insurance recommendation. Let me jump over, and that's a great question. So it's a very remote destination. You need to have some type of medical evacuation insurance that protects you in the event that you have to be flown out of Christmas Island on a medical jet. That is a really expensive ticket out of there. And we require that you have medical evac insurance. And let's see, don't have the link on this particular page. I'll put it on this particular page. But we use Global Rescue as the one that we do. It's got to be on here somewhere. But we use Global Rescue, but you can do one quick search, and so there it is, Global Rescue Insurance. Boom. That's exactly what they do. And I want you to listen close to this other part too. Look at their insurance. They do a great job. I've heard testimonials where these people have stepped in and done exactly what they said they were going to do. Lord willing, we'll never have one of our guests or one of us do it. I personally buy this insurance. They're going to get you to the hospital that you need, and they provide a whole bunch of different resources that we utilize from time to time, especially during COVID. But the other thing that they do, and I want you to listen to this part really close, is if you're going to buy trip insurance that would cover the cost of your trip in the event you have to cancel, you miss a flight, the world's on fire again, no pun intended, but something prevents you or us from getting to Christmas Island, and you would like that cost of that trip covered because it was an unforeseen event. They have I can't remember the name of it, maybe Steve does, but it's basically a no questions asked cancellation policy or addendum that you can add, but you have to buy it within 3 weeks of purchasing or booking your reservation or your trip. So I think it's worth kind of, when you book it, look at it. The airfare to Christmas Island, you're going to be under $2,000 for the whole ticket. You're going to fly to Honolulu, fly Honolulu south. You got another $3,200 into the trip, so you're a little over $5,000 just into sunk expense between airfare and trip. Maybe you get the insurance, maybe you don't. Those are totally personal decisions on how much likely it is you think you're going to have to cancel, et cetera. Totally personal decisions. We just require that you have the medical evac insurance because we think you need to get out of there, and we don't need to be worrying about who's going to pay for it. Is the kind of the lead, the trip lead. We don't want to have to make any decisions that have any type of financial implication. We just want to get you home and get you to the right doctor in the event you're sick or anything like that. So yeah, really good questions. Do we have any more questions for the group here? Any of the red staff, you guys have anything you just want to throw in? Any concluders that you want to add to the discussion?
Hey, Joe, for those of us that probably won't be able to make the rendezvous in January, will you be sending out some information that goes over what was talked about there? I think you did that several years ago, right before COVID hit.
Yeah, it's a good question. No, we won't, it won't be like rendezvous specific, Steve, but we'll have a Zoom meeting for just each group that goes with Reds. Every hosted group will have a pre-funk meeting just for that group before embarking on the trip. So every group will have a meeting, but there won't be any like we won't do anything at the rendezvous. All of our attention will be given just to the rendezvous there. But we'll have a Zoom, before we go on our trip, for sure, of just our group. And then the other thing I want to give you guys is as we wrap up here, and I hope you're as excited about this trip as I am. I'm going in February, and it's been a long time since I've been there because the 3-year, pandemic closure when the country was not accessible due to COVID restrictions. But there are some great resources that even Reds has put together. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but I'm going to scroll through here and I'll share an article. I'll have to share it in the chat. I don't see it right here in front of me. I didn't bookmark the link, but I'll share an article with you that's basically everything you need to know about fishing Christmas Island. And although it's been 3+ years since I've been there, Christmas Island still Christmas Island. It's been like that way for eons, and it's going to be like that way hopefully for another eon. So I'll share that article with you in the chat as well. But if there aren't any more questions, hey, thanks everybody for tuning in. I do want to just invite you to tune in next week as well. We're going to have another Zoom Wednesday 1:00 next week, and we are going to talk about rooster fish and Dorado fishing, which I did just in June. Did it with my wife. It was an absolutely awesome trip. But I'll kind of take you through what it's like to be on the Pangas down there, what that trip's like. But tune into that next Wednesday at 1. This meeting's recorded, and this link will go up. You have to enter a little passcode, but it'll all be on the webpage. Share this with your friends. Watch it again. Use it as a resource to go back and get these links in the chat if you need them. But unless anybody speaks up now, I'm just going to say see you next week. We appreciate
How many
you.
are in the group that y'all take each trip?
Oh, good question. I got most of it. You were broken there for just a second, Rick. But we try to book, most of our weeks have 22 anglers.
Okay.
And there will generally be 24 in the group. We book it our goal is to book it to absolute capacity because of the story that Steve shared, that can happen when we have other groups in the lodge, then the Reds host doesn't have access to directing all of the guide staff in the lodge. So we have found it like, hey, let's take the biggest group possible. Let's control the pecking order of the guides. Let's rotate these guides through the Reds guest. All of the Reds customers get fair and equal treatment. If there are a few special opportunities or unique things pop up, like maybe the blue water fishing is out of this world, or there's coastal fishing, we're not in a power struggle with any other guests at the lodge. So I think that answers your question, but part of the reason we like to control the big group is because of the aforementioned discussion on just guide control.
Thanks.
Mike says, I see that fanny pack beside you these days. Are you favoring the fanny pack or the sling pack? Man, I've tried everything. I like this for saltwater. It's great for Christmas Island. I've used big hip packs like this in Christmas Island. The problem with this thing is my net is pretty big. I like to carry a big net when I'm trout fishing with it, and then that blocks my access into here. So that's kind of a pain in the neck. So I'm kind of like going back to a sling pack for trout. But in Christmas Island, I really recommend a 2-strap backpack. You're going to want to carry 30 to 40 ounces of water, a Nalgene like this minimum, or like an insulated bottle to keep your drink cold. We like to mix up a powdered electrolyte mixes in our water bottles, and you're going to want to have that backpack, like water, some snacks, all of your tackle, enough to fish, a third of a day, at least 2 to 3, 4 hours. is wise every time you get off that boat, and it's hard to do with a hip pack. But I've been through them all. I've been through every single thing, and I'm kind of going back to a sling pack for my trout, and just because the way it holds a big net. If you don't hold a big net, it's not a big deal. But I'm not sure there's a perfect solution. When I find it, I'll let you know though. Okay, well, yeah, let's get booked up. We got some space remaining in the trips this upcoming. Yeah, and last question is a basic dry bag okay for the boat bag? Absolutely. You want your fishing bag, like say this was my fishing bag. I want my fishing bag in the boat every day with me. I'm going to bring 2 to 3 rods, probably 2 to 3 rods are going to go in the boat every day with me. And then I'll have a dry bag, which will have usually a dry shirt. I like a little hand towel. It might have a larger container of sunscreen. It might have a second bottle of electrolyte mixes. There's coolers on the boat, but I prefer, like when it comes to liquids, I like to kind of manage my own liquids, drinking stuff to make sure I've got all the water I need quickly accessible, so that halfway through the day I might be able to, trade this bottle, trade an empty bottle for a big bottle and just throw it in my pack. So my dry bag will just live on the boat, and I might even leave my big fly box in that dry bag on the boat and then use that to feed my smaller fly boxes, which would be in, say, if this were my wading pack. So, yep, dry bag in the boat, hip bag to wade or backpack to wade, 3 rods every day, and then bring at least one big water bottle on the trip. Be good. Fluids are super important. Last tip is like general, just travel tip: powder electrolytes, drink lots of water. Don't drink too much alcohol going into the trip. It's super easy to do. We've seen that 1,000 times. I might even have fallen victim to that once or twice. But the front end of that trip, you really want to make sure and stay hydrated and try to get really good rest that first day or two. And then you'll be a little jet lagged, but the end of day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you'll really come to life. You'll be full of energy and just really having a wonderful time. If you watch your fluids and kind of your sleep intake early in that trip and even right before the trip. So we want to have happy travel. So, yeah, other than that, I'll end the meeting. Like I said, the recording, it'll take about an hour or 2, but I'll put the copy of the recording on that seminar page. But we just appreciate all of you customers so much, traveling with Reds, being interested in Reds. If our hosted dates don't work and you need just a referral on who or how to get booked for a trip outside of our hosted dates, reach out to us anyways. We can certainly help, facilitate your booking and help get you prepared so that you're out there with the right information. We're here to help. There won't be any hard feelings whatsoever if you can't make our hosted trip. Just contact us and stay in touch and let us help take the burden of a little bit of that planning away from you. So, okay, thank you very, very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope you're now dreaming about fly fishing in Christmas Island.